Hello, everyone. Philip Lee returning with a new episode of Civil War Chat. Today is Monday, the 22nd of May, 2023. Click on the subscribe button in the lower right here to subscribe to future episodes of Civil War Chat. And also, in the far upper right, click on that notification bell to be notified when those episodes are released by YouTube. Today's episode is titled, How the Civil War Impacts President Biden's Debt Ceiling. President Biden needs more revenue if America is to avoid defaulting on its debt. Since the Constitution stipulates that revenue bills must originate in the House of Representatives, legal interpretations to date lead to the conclusion that he must compromise with House GOP leaders over their bill. He cannot order the Senate to introduce an alternate bill, nor can the White House staff put a bill on the House floor by themselves. Consequently, he is threatening to reinterpret the Constitution, specifically through a provision of the 14th Amendment to that Constitution, a clause which would enable him, if interpreted differently, to unilaterally increase America's debt without limit or any checks from the House of Representatives. Since the 1868 Amendment governed how the former Confederate states would be readmitted to the Union, it required that they participate in paying off the federal government's Civil War debts. And these were quite large. They went up 40-fold from $65 million to $2.7 billion. Sounds like a little now, but it was a hell of a lot then. And it also prohibited, the 14th Amendment also prohibited the former Confederate states from paying off any Confederate debt. Now, the applicable clause reads, quote, the validity of the public debt of the United States, authorized by law, shall not be questioned. Now, the pro-Biden interpretation has two problems. First, the provision was a direct consequence of the Civil War. It was not intended to give any later president powers reserved to the House of Representatives. Nobody voting for that in Congress or nobody ratifying in the states had any intention that it had anything to do with other than how the Confederate states would come back into the Union. Second, ultimately, only Congress can determine which debts are, quote, authorized by law, close quote, not the president. Because there's part of the weakness right there in his argument, because even though it states that the validity of the public debt shall not, the validity of the public debt of the United States authorized by law shall not be questioned. Well, Biden doesn't have the power to authorize the debts by law. Only Congress can do that. Nonetheless, if Biden wants to address the 14th Amendment's financial provisions, he should appreciate that his argument reveals that ex-Confederates and their descendants have already paid reparations through those provisions for losing the Civil War, if not for slavery per se. For at least 25 years after this war had ended, over half of the federal budget was devoted to three items. One, interest on the federal debt. Now, that's interest on the federal debt, not the Confederate debt, interest on the federal debt. Two, budget surpluses used to pay down that federal debt. And three, Union veterans' pensions. Not one of those three things, which accounted for over half of the budget, benefited ex-Confederates or their progeny, even though they had to pay their share of taxes to fund those items for the other Americans, basically the Northerners, that did benefit from those payments. And in the case of Union veterans' pensions, the last one was not paid until May of 2020. For 65 years after the war, they went up every year. The Union veterans' pension, the last one, as I say, was paid by the one soldier's descendant in May of 2020. Yearly disbursements of Union veterans' pensions increased annually from 1865 to 1921, a total of 56 years of growing budget expenditures for that one line item. And in 1893, Union veterans' pensions alone accounted for over 40% of the entire federal budget. Southerners had to pay their fair share of those pensions, even though the former Confederates had gotten no benefit from them. They were funded by high tariffs that were injurious to the South's export economy, but beneficial to the Northern manufacturers' base, protected from overseas competition by deterrence tariffs. Given that such facts are contrary to today's culturally elite narrative, they remain little known, but they also remain facts, and they are facts. Now, I'd like to bring to your attention my latest book. It's a novel, Firepower, by Philip Lee. It is concerning the Civil War. I have given it sort of the unofficial slogan to associate with it: the greatest story never told. Repeating rifles were invented before the Civil War, but they didn't get out for meaningful numbers until the last year of the war. And this book, or this novel, investigates how it could have happened. And what it reveals is, if you connect the dots of actual historical figures in the roles that they played, you can see of a conspiracy to among certain individuals to keep the deployment of repeating rifles in the Union Army at a small number. So the story is, as I say, it's based on historical facts. There's a big surprise in here as to why this happened. I can't reveal much about it, but I trust that my readers will find it really quite interesting. So I recommend my novel, Firepower by Philip Lee. You can get it at Amazon paperback for $14. You can get I think the Kindle version is $4. If you'd like an autographed copy, email me, Phil, PHIL_Lee, LEIGH, at me.com. And I'll sell it to you for $17, but I include the postage with that. Okay, that's our show for today, and I want to thank you for watching. I look forward to seeing you next time.